Hello there and welcome to episode 12 of the Unqualified Opinions podcast. I'm your host, as always, Marco Yerkovich. Joining me today is our lad from down under, Will Byerman.
About to move out to Nevada. Give me a slice of that plastic surgery money.
And the always enigmatic Tim Seipel.
I feel like that's getting weirder every single week. On today's episode, we will discuss Ron Rivera's firing, the Cowboys losing again, and our college football rankings reaction, and much, much more.
Also, we are proud to announce that as of now, we have a new Spotify account. We're going to be starting to upload some new episodes, and we're going to have all our old ones too. Make sure to follow that. And we're super excited to kind of be taking this to the next level now.
Check it out and subscribe, boys.
All right, and before we begin, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment down below.
Hit the bell, get the notifications.
All right, let's get right into it with our reactions to the firing of Ron Rivera by the Carolina Panthers. So your thoughts on that?
I wasn't a fan of the move. I mean, I kind of like, it's similar to Dallas. I kind of agree with Jerry Jones in that if you're not going to get better by firing your coach, I don't really see a huge point in doing it. I mean, they don't have any big in-house names I can think of who they want to test out. Like even the Cowboys have Kellen Moore, who I know we'll get to later on, but I didn't really see a huge point in firing Ron Rivera at this point of the season. I could get why they want to do it later, but not now.
Okay, so with no Cam Newton, obviously a guy who has fallen off but was an MVP less than 5 years ago, was the firing warranted with a whole backup quarterback and going 5-7 in a tough division?
I mean, I think Ron Rivera's done about as much as he could do with the system and the roster that he has. I think right now with Cam Newton, I think the big struggles that he's had is being 100% healthy. I mean, we saw it last year when he got injured, and we're seeing it. We saw it earlier in the season where he just wasn't performing at the same level because of the injuries that he's had. So whether or not this firing is warranted, I think Ron Rivera is a good coach and he brings a lot of maturity to the coaching position, but I just don't know if this is going to be a positive move for the Panthers.
So speaking of kind of Cam Newton's spot in this situation and Ron Rivera's firing, is Kyle Allen the future QB for the Panthers? I know he started out hot, but he's gotten cold over the past few weeks. So do they go with Kyle Allen or do they go back to Cam Newton when he returns from injury next season?
There really isn't a clear answer right now because personally, I think part of Riverboat Ron's firing was less how he's done this season and more just the fact that he's had a ton of talent recently. I know Newton's been hurt a lot over the past couple of years since that MVP year, but at the same time, when he's been healthy, he hasn't really reached that MVP form again, but you could still argue he's been good enough that they think Rivera should have won more with the talented roster they do have. You're right. Allen's gone cold. He really looked the part of a future, if not a franchise quarterback, at least a guy who you can, an above average starter, you can win some games with. He's cooled off. Honestly, Newton and Allen both still have a lot of upside. I think I just run it back with both of them, make it a competition next year.
So do we see a spot where Rivera will land? Obviously, he was a defensive coordinator in the league with the Chargers and the Bears before landing the head coaching job for the Panthers. Do we see a spot where Rivera can land either as a DC or as a head coach?
I mean, personally, I think he would fit in great with the Browns just because he would bring a level of maturity that the Browns currently lack, especially in the coaching position. And he really brings, I feel like, a really good environment with him. I mean, if you look at previous players talking about Ron Rivera's firing, they're not talking about him as a coach. They're talking about him as a friend and as a father figure. So I think he would be a great addition for the Browns with a team that kind of lacks a sense of maturity. I feel like at certain points we're not seeing a mature team out on the field for the Browns.
And from what I've read about Freddie Kitchens, he apparently brought more of like where Tim talked about father figure for Rivera. Apparently Kitchens always just had more of a fun uncle vibe. And I mean, he just isn't really inspiring and leading them the way they wanted him to.
Hey, I like my fun uncle.
All right, good for you, man. But so if we had to take it, I agree with the Browns a lot, but if I had to take it to another team, my Detroit Lions, I am really not sure if Matt Patricia's still going to be the coach by the end of this season. Just hasn't shown a lot of growth, and a lot of that is Glover Quinn today said on the radio that he doesn't think his players will be willing to fight for Patricia. Rivera's good at getting players to fight for him. I think Detroit and Cleveland, I'd say, are going to be your two leading spots for Rivera.
Now, you guys both named, I assume, head coaching positions. I would go with a defensive coordinator position. I think Rivera would fit in nicely as the DC of the Chicago Bears. They were amazing last season with Vic Fangio as their DC, allowing Nagy to focus more on the offensive side of things. Then their DC Fangio gets the head coaching job in Denver. And the offense and the team overall has fallen off. So I think Rivera coming in there, obviously a head coach and former defensive coordinator, a really stout guy, controlling the defense, gives Nagy more of a chance to, control the offensive side of things. So we kind of talked about where Rivera will go, but who are some head coaching candidates to replace Rivera as the head coach of the Panthers?
I mean, it's been reported that the Panthers have been looking into Josh McDaniels, as he was a prime coaching prospect 2 years ago when the Colts hired him, and then he took off and went back to a safe home in New England. But I mean, I think there's a lot of potential for this Panthers offense, and I think there's a lot of stuff that McDaniels can do. I mean, with Christian McCaffrey, I mean, you can't go wrong with him. And if you have a healthy Cam Newton, I think he can be from about maybe average to above average. I think he can perform still at a high level. And so it'll be interesting to see where they go. I mean, Josh McDaniels is one example, but I think another guy we can look at is Kevin Stefanski, the offensive coordinator for the Minnesota Vikings. I think he would also be an interesting look for the Panthers.
Yeah, I really like the McDaniels one a lot, especially because we know he's very good with those pass-catching running backs. And if he's done with what he's doing with like James White and Rex Burkhead, shout out to our boy. Just think of what he could do with Christian McCaffrey and Curtis Samuels. That's got to be a dream for McDaniels. But just to take another one Tim hasn't looked at already, I mentioned him earlier, Kellen Moore. He's looking like a really good coordinator. I think it's kind of in vogue right now for the league guys to hire that young offensive-minded coach like a Zach Taylor or McVay. That's really the trend right now. I think Kellen Moore is going to get a lot of offers, and I think the Panthers would be a good one for him.
Yeah, I agree with both you guys. The young offensive guys will be the way to go, whether it's McDaniels, Stefanski, or Kellen Moore. I think those are your top three guys, but you also could see a guy from the college ranks, come up there, but you never quite know. The one thing I know is it's definitely not going to be Urban Meyer.
Oh, no.
I know we talked about that. No way, Urban Meyer. Speaking of big brands, as Urban Meyer used to be the head coach of Ohio State, another big brand that might be looking for a head coach here in the near future, the Dallas Cowboys. They lost again on Thanksgiving to the Buffalo Bills. They're now 500, scrapping to win their division. Garrett's hot seat is getting a lot hotter. Will Garrett finish the season with the Cowboys?
Jerry Jones already pretty much said he's gonna keep him for the rest of the season, but Garrett's pretty much a lame duck at this point. I don't think there's a chance he lasts longer than this season unless he makes a crazy improbable run to the Super Bowl. But if I had to look for a replacement, I'd say Moore or honestly Ron Rivera.
Yeah, I mean, I personally think at this point with Garrett, I mean, it's been clear. Jerry Jones has clearly stated that he's going to finish the season with the team, but I just don't see him finishing the season with a good run. I just don't see them competing at a high level while Jason Garrett is at the coaching position. And I don't really know how I feel about all the Kellen Moore hype. I mean, he's been really good in his first year as an offensive coordinator, but he also has Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott and maybe one of the best offensive lines, along with three great wide receivers in Amari Cooper, a promising Michael Gallup, and an experienced veteran in Randall Cobb as a slot receiver. I mean, you have a lot of tools and a lot of weapons there. So I'm not totally sure if we can go all in on Kellen Moore yet. I think he's been great, and I think he's the guy for the Cowboys for the future as an offensive coordinator, but maybe not as a coach yet.
Right. What we're looking at right now is a remaining schedule for the Cowboys of the Bears, the Rams, the Eagles, and Washington. So what we have is still a very solid chance to win the division, probably going to go 2-2, finish the season 8-8, have the tiebreaker against Philadelphia, make it to the playoffs, get smacked around in the divisional round by San Francisco or Seattle, whoever ends up in the wild card spot, with the 5th seed. The Cowboys have to move on, like you guys have said. So overall, what are we taking from this? Where do they go forward as an organization? Do we think, I know you guys talked about Kellen Moore, but do they go from inside the organization promotion-wise, or they go out and get an outsider?
It's really hard to predict what the Cowboys are going to do because Jerry Jones is such an enigma. Come to think of it, I mentioned a bit earlier, I think Rivera honestly wouldn't be a terrible candidate for them.
How big of a name can we talk for the Dallas Cowboys job? With the Dallas Cowboys team, the brand as big as it is, the biggest brand in the NFL.
They want big names.
With as much talent there, we've all agreed multiple times on the podcast, top 5 in talent at almost every single skill position and position overall on the team. This team is Super Bowl worthy, and right now they're 6-6. What kind of head coach are they getting next season?
I mean, Lincoln Riley is a promising prospect at that coaching position.
Barry Switzer once went from the Oklahoma head coaching spot to the Dallas Cowboys head coaching spot.
Exactly, and he's a guy with a big name program, Oklahoma, and he's really done a great job there. Obviously, the Cowboys are a different type of pressure, a different level.
But he has dealt with it in the past.
Right, he's dealt with it. And I think a person we can think about maybe in the coaching season, while all these hirings are happening, we haven't heard much about Mike McCarthy recently. And I'm not saying that he's going to go to the Cowboys, but I am saying he might be on the market as a possibility.
Yeah, I think the Cowboys last time they hired a coach, they went young, they went promising. I think this time
they went Clapper.
Yeah, I think this time Jerry's going to go a little. I think he's going to try to play it safe. McCarthy, Rivera, especially McCarthy, makes a lot of sense. I think he's going to play it safe, defensive guy who's not going to take too many big risks.
Well, what I think we all have come to a consensus on is the Ginger Clapper era in Dallas is over. They're moving on. They're going to find someone new. With that, we're going to move on to our NFL power rankings for this week. So at number 10, I have the Buffalo Bills. Overall, a bad loss this week, but still a team that is in the wild card race in the AFC. Actually, they beat the Cowboys on Thanksgiving. So we will see if they can recover and stay it at pace with New England. Now they're only one game behind after New England lost, so they could still win the AFC East. They have one more matchup with New England, so they would have the tiebreaker. Number 9, I have the Houston Texans. After that win against New England, they're proving to be more and more of a legitimate team. 8, I have the Vikings, kept them just ahead of the Texans, just because I believe they're the more complete team. 7, I have the Chiefs, just purely because they beat the Vikings, that tiebreaker. 6, I have the Packers, a team that is kind of an ebb and flow team. They look really good some weeks. Sometimes they're not quite there. But I think the Packers are a team that has the skill and the potential to be a really solid team and a contender in the NFC. 5, I have the Saints, just not really playing up to their standards right now. Kept it close against the Panthers, and overall haven't been in the best of groove since Drew Brees got back. We're almost better at times in the season with Teddy Bridgewater. 4, I have the Patriots, who are playing pretty bad right now. They're still winning football games. They're 10-2, but it's more of a credit to their light schedule, and we will see they still have a few more tests remaining in the season, but honestly, the record says it for themselves. Even if they're playing, not the best of teams, they're still 10-2, and they're still finding ways to win despite being completely depleted on the offensive side of the ball. 3, I have the Seahawks. They're playing amazing. I know they beat the 49ers and they have the same record, but I have to go with the Seahawks on this one. At 3, they just overall have played 7 one-possession games this season. You could say they're clutch. They're playing well at the end of games, but they are putting themselves in those situations. 2, I have the 49ers. They've been pretty amazing so far this season. Obviously, they've been a little disappointing at times, but offensively speaking, they're really starting to ramp things up to try and catch up with their league best defense. And at number 1, it's got to be Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens.
So I think I'll take 10 through 6, let Tim get that top half there. But the Bills might be my favorite team to watch. You never know what you're getting with them. I think Josh Allen has really stepped it up tremendously. I'm super excited to see everything that the Bills do. Texans, I'm going to be really interested to see how much noise they can make in the playoffs.
I really wanted to put them higher, but I just feel like the Vikings and Chiefs might be a little bit more complete.
I like that position for them. When I saw them there, I was like, they should be higher, but come to look at who's in front of them, that's a good place for them. Again, I wonder what their ceiling is, considering they're so hot and cold. Same can also be said for the Vikings and Chiefs. Crazy, crazy cool highs, but some weird lows. I know the Chiefs had that little mid-season lull there. The Vikings got off to a slow start. And actually, the only team I have anything else to say about, I'll jump up to New Orleans, is I think they should consider a little Kawhi Leonard load management for Drew Brees. I know Teddy Bridgewater played well, but I think Drew Brees is still the best quarterback on the roster. But I think they should keep.
They have
Teddy,
the division wrapped up already.
I'd say put Teddy in, so you have a fresh Drew Brees ready for the playoffs. Load
All right,
management.
Tim, your thoughts on the top 5 or top 10?
Yeah, I definitely think the Saints have been underperforming lately. I think their potential is a lot higher. Their ceiling's a lot higher.
Yeah, I think both with the Patriots and the Saints, and even the Packers a little bit, are a bit frustrating because you have to put them down because of their few losses and their performances in their wins. But you know those are teams that could be in the top 3, if not the number 1 team.
Right, they can be still very lethal, and they have a lot of potential. I want to point out 3 teams that I find very similar. The New England Patriots, the San Francisco 49ers, and the Buffalo Bills. In these teams, you see a defense that is fairly elite. I mean, they're really good defenses. They're able to stop the offenses and really give their offense good field position. But the problem is their offenses aren't as efficient. And the only reason why they're in the games are because of their defenses. So it's going to be interesting to see how well these teams do. And I mean, I have them on my watch list where, I mean, if a team is able to do well offensively against this team, I mean, we saw it when the Ravens played the Patriots. When they got going, they couldn't stop them. And the offense couldn't catch up for the Patriots.
Yeah,
so,
you're talking elite defenses. 49ers are 1, Patriots are 2, Bills are 3. These are the 3 best defenses in the league.
Correct.
And to add on to Tim's comparison, the one thing they all do have on offense is they all have a quarterback who, really, no offense to Tom Brady, legend, but he's been pretty off at times this season.
Pretty subpar, at least for his standards.
Josh Allen's still kind of coming into his own right now. Garoppolo's been a little iffy. So
Probably still recovering from the ACL, finding his rhythm a bit.
There's a reason for all of them, but all of them have a quarterback who can take them over the top, but you're never sure if they're going to.
All right, Tim, your thoughts?
Yeah, so just real quick on the quarterback situation. I mean, each of these positions, with Tom Brady, Josh Allen, and Jimmy Garoppolo, you see just a quarterback that's able to do just enough to get the win. You're not seeing a quarterback
it's the defenses winning those games.
Exactly.
And, on the other side of things, you have complete teams like, Baltimore and Seattle, but then on the inverse of that, you've got teams that are offensively like that, where KC and Dallas, like their offenses are winning the games, not their defense.
Right.
So that's just an interesting look. That's my top 10 for the week. So now we're going to welcome in 2 new guests to our podcast, Paul Hires.
What's up?
And Mr. Jared DeHaan.
Illinois is going bowling, baby.
All right, so we're going to move on to some college football conference rankings. So the idea of this is to just take a whole conference, all the teams in them, and just rank them from 6 to 1. So let's start with Jared. Who do you have at number 6?
At number 6, I have the American Conference. And I think it's just because they have Cincinnati and Memphis, who have been doing really well lately. I think those two, and they're my 6th best conference.
All right, Paul, who do you have at 6?
Mountain West. They had quite a few upsets in the first 3-4 weeks, if you look back at it. They've been looking solid.
All right, so at 6, I have the ACC. So I actually have a Power 5 conference in the 6th spot. I just think outside of Clemson, this conference is pretty abysmal. Your second best team in this conference is Virginia, then maybe Virginia Tech, Wake Forest. I mean, none of these teams are quality opponents. Unfortunately, one of these teams, not named Clemson, has to take up a spot in the New Year's Six Bowls, which is a shame. You're going to see a Virginia or a Virginia Tech taking up space in a New Year's Six Bowl when a team like Cincinnati or Memphis could be getting in there, or Boise State. So I think that is a real tragedy. So, Jared, who do you have at 5 in your conference rankings?
At 5, I have the Pac-12. I mean, they have Utah and Oregon, but if you look at the Pac-12 North, in second place ended up Oregon State, who is 5-7 overall. That just shows you how little depth there is in the Pac-12. So they're in my 5th spot.
All right, Paul, who do you have at 5?
I'm going with the ACC on this one. They've got Clemson, who's been pretty good. They've won 2 of the last 3 national championships. And then what? Nothing. I mean, when we're talking about the full conferences, I'm talking about top to bottom. Top to bottom, this conference is number 5 in the Power 5. Who I think they had 2 teams in the rankings like most of the year, just not really consistent there.
Yeah, so I agree with you. The ACC just really struggling. So at 5, I have the AAC. I have the American Conference. Obviously, you have the powerhouses of the American, your Cincinnati's, your Memphis, Temple, SMU, and they always have a really solid team. For the past few years, it was UCF. Of course, they also have Navy. Just a really solid conference overall. I struggled. I really wanted to put them ahead of the Pac-12, but I have them nonetheless at 5. Jared, who do you have at 4?
I have the ACC as mine at 4. I mean, as you said, they don't have much depth, but I think there's just a bit more depth than there is in the Pac-12, so that's why I have ACC as my 4th.
All right, Paul.
Yeah, I'm flipping the switch on that one. Pac-12, I mean, yeah, they're not great. They can't seem to get a team with less than 2 losses every year. But on the other hand, the bottom of their conference isn't like completely the worst teams in the FBS. So I think they're all like really packed right in that mediocre state versus the ACC, which like half of them barely can get 3 wins.
So I will have to agree with Paul on that one, the Pac-12. Again, I really wanted to put the AAC in the 4th spot, but I just couldn't bring myself to do that because of the Pac-12's elite company, which is far and above better than the ACC's elite company. When you look at the top 3 or 4 teams, Utah, Oregon, USC, Arizona State, they just have a solid group of teams this year with all really solid wins and have played really well overall. So, Jared, who do you have at your 3rd spot?
In my 3rd spot, I have the Big 12. I mean, you have Oklahoma and Baylor who are at the top of that conference, but then you have Oklahoma State, Iowa State, Kansas State, and Texas who are all right there as well, who have all done really well this year. So I think they've been pretty solid this year, so they're taking my 3rd spot.
All right, Paul, who do you have at 3?
Yeah, Big 12 for me as well. And the key word in that, Jared, is they've all been right there, but they haven't like made that next move on up. And really, they're so close. I mean, Oklahoma has been in the playoff the last few years, but it just seems like when it comes down to those big games where, it's like top 3, top 4 best teams against other conferences, they just can't seem to get those wins.
Yeah, so I'm going to have to agree with both of you guys on that one. Big 12 at 3. You guys talked about the depth and then also just their struggles to be better than those Big 10 and SEC teams. So I think the 3rd spot is pretty solidly right where the Big 12 sits. So, Jared, who do you have in your 2nd spot?
In my 2nd spot, I have the SEC. I mean, they have 5 teams in the top 12 of the college football playoff. But I think as you get farther down in the conference, it gets pretty mediocre once you get to Mississippi, South Carolina, Vanderbilt, Arkansas. Once you get there, you kind of get to the bottom of the barrel. So that's why I put them underneath the Big 10, and I put SEC in 2nd.
All right, Paul, who do you have at 2?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Jared, we're on the same page here. SEC, they look good and they get a lot of, credit for the wins they get. But when you're talking about conference rankings, you're talking about top to bottom. When Tennessee or a team like Vanderbilt loses to non-Power 5 teams embarrassingly, I mean, you really can't say that's a quality schedule. Not to mention, they don't play 9 conference games like the rest of them do. They only play 8. And that's another factor I think we should talk about later in this podcast.
All right. So at 2, I actually have the Big 10. I really, this was a toss up for me between the Big 10 and the SEC. But just a point that Jared made that the top five SEC teams are all in the top 12 of the college football playoff rankings. I mean, that's nearly half of the top 12. That's quite impressive. And then you were talking about issues of depth. The Big 10 definitely has that, of course. You have some of the worst teams in the country at the bottom of the Big 10. Of course, annually, Rutgers is one of the worst teams. Maryland is awful. Northwestern has been terrible this year, and it's just a revolving door at the top of the Big 10 West. Of the East, of course, you've got the stalwarts of Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State. But, I struggle to see the amount of depth in the Big 10 as you guys do. So you guys have the Big 10 at number 1?
Yes. I just think, they have 6 teams in top 18 of college football playoff. I've just been a big-time Big 10 fan in my life. So I've watched a lot of Big Ten football, and I think it just speaks to me more. And I just like watching that football in their style, and I think that's why I have them at number 1.
Paul?
Yeah, same. I think, we might have a little bit of bias towards the Big Ten just because of Nebraska. But other than that, I mean, you look at like the bowl records for the conferences the last few years, and the Big Ten is just completely dominating. I don't know if that's like because they're, just better off of a bowl game, or if they don't schedule the right matchups or something. But I mean, really, and if you look at the bottom, I mean, Maryland, yeah, they're not great, but look what they did to Syracuse. I mean, you got to give credit to stuff like that. And I don't know, it's a topic though. It's a topic to debate.
Yeah, so I just went with the SEC at number 1. They have the most bowl eligible teams at 10 than any other conference in the FBS. You look at the top, I mean, that top is very strong. Georgia, Florida, LSU, Alabama, Auburn. But you look at those middle of the pack teams, Tennessee, Kentucky, Texas A&M, Mississippi State, bowl eligible teams, strong teams that have non-conference wins that are quite solid. And you even look at teams like South Carolina with top 10 wins. This is a very deep conference. And just like any other conference, they've got teams at the bottom because someone has to lose all those conference games. But the top is stronger in the SEC with more teams at the top than I think the Big Ten does. So with that, let's move on to our reactions to the college football playoff rankings. And our main discussion here being the discussion between Utah at 5 or number 6 or 7 Baylor if they win their conference title games. So Jared, if Utah and either Oklahoma or Baylor wins, who do you have making the playoffs?
This is a really tough thing to discuss because it's 5, 6, and 7. It's all about who's going to win their conference.
Right. So let's say Utah and Oklahoma win. Who do you have getting in?
I'm going to have to say Oklahoma just because like we just went through our rankings and we said Big 12 was overall better than Pac-12. I think Oklahoma's had more challenge in the games they've played so far than Utah has. And Utah's loss was against USC. Oklahoma's loss was against Kansas State. I mean,
those are pretty equal losses at this point. Even though K-State didn't crawl back up in the top 25 at the end there, those are pretty equal losses in the committee's eyes.
But I think Oklahoma's just had more competition through their conference. So I think they would get the nod if it was between Utah and Oklahoma.
What about if there's Baylor and Utah? Your thoughts on that, Jared? If it's Baylor that wins the Big 12 championship game?
I would have to treat it the same way because just like the Big 12
even though Baylor has played worse throughout the season, those tight wins against Texas A&M, TCU.
I would say yes, just because, again, about the conference they're in and the more competition they've had, I would have to treat it the same way I would put Baylor in.
All right, Paul, your thoughts on that? The Utah versus Oklahoma or Utah versus Baylor discussion?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Obviously, if Utah loses, I mean, it's pretty obvious who's getting in. But, I mean, if Baylor wins and Utah wins, I think you give it to Utah. I really cannot look at this Baylor schedule and just the games they've played with.
They beat Rice by 8 points.
Right. Utah hasn't had that great of a schedule, but it's got to be better than Baylor's. Now, if Oklahoma wins, that's a bit of a toss-up. That's going to be the big decision. Seems like we've had one every year with this playoff. But honestly, I mean, and it's going to come down to like how much they would win by in those
that final statement game.
Right.
Because Utah right now does not have a top 25 win. The only top 25 team they've faced is USC, and that's their one loss on the season, who's low 20s, right? So I think if Oklahoma wins, and if they win big, that's a second win against Baylor, and that's their third top 25 win of the season. They beat Oklahoma State last week. I think Oklahoma gets in, but I think if Baylor wins, Utah gets in. Yeah. This, of course, is all assuming Utah wins. So let's look higher up in the rankings. We were just kind of assuming that being the situation that only the 4th spot is available. Us assuming that Georgia losing the SEC championship game drops down, that 4th spot is available. But can LSU, Ohio State, or Clemson withstand losses in their conference games and still make the playoffs?
I think Ohio State and LSU can withstand those losses just because their strength of schedule and how well they've played. But Clemson, I mean, we've already talked about the ACC has been kind of average this year, all the way down after Clemson. So I think if Clemson would lose, I think their spot would be open because I can't see how they played this year, how you couldn't put Oklahoma or Utah or whoever wins.
Jared, I completely agree with you right now. I think LSU, of course, even if it's a bad loss, it doesn't look great, but it's still their first loss of the season and they've been dominant throughout. So I think regardless of the result, LSU and Ohio State are safe. Then, of course, that means Georgia gets in because Georgia is beating LSU. Do you think Clemson is safe, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, come on, they're playing Virginia, so it should be a win, right? But if they lose, they're out. I mean, if Georgia wins, they're in, and then you got to keep LSU in there. Depending on the margin of victory, I
still think they get in. Of course, Georgia would jump them. LSU would probably fall to 3, maybe even 4, and then Georgia would move up to 2 or 3.
If it's a close loss, like a close loss to the 4th ranked team with the rest of their wins in this season, LSU should get in with a loss.
Especially with a QB like Joe Burrow, who's right now is the leading Heisman candidate. Especially if they have one loss, people would want to see them in the college football semifinals.
Right, and I think just based on resume and how they played this season, I think that's likely to happen. Now, the nightmare scenario for the committee is an LSU loss, an Ohio State loss, a Clemson loss, a Utah loss. Then who is going in, who's getting in? That would be the complete mess. Again, as we've said, that's super unlikely to happen, but you never know.
I think this just shows that we need more than 4 teams in this playoff because now, if you look at 3 to about 10, they're all so close. And I think it just shows that
8-team expansion.
It just needs to expand because it'll make more sense. And I think it'll bring more excitement to the college football playoffs.
You know what? We will get into that in the coming weeks in between the announcement of the 4 teams and the actual playoff. I think in those coming weeks, we will discuss that quite a bit. The need for expansion, how much expansion is needed. So with that, we're going to move on to our weekly Pick'em segment. Welcome back, Will and Tim, to the show. And go to our new favorite mini-series of the Unqualified Opinions episodes, Just the Numbers with Paul Hires.
All right. Well, I don't know if that's the best name for that, but all right. Here we go. So, Marco still in dead last. You picked up 4 wins last week, 30 and 28. You're above 500 record now. Jared pops up to 34 and 24. Tim sits at third, 29 and 17. Will only 1% behind me, but still in second at 35 and 18.
Coming for you, Paul.
I'm at 39 and 19. All of us went 4 and 1 last week. Jared went 3 and 2.
Any other stats you want to divulge there, Paul?
I don't know. Just shout out to Will. I didn't realize this before, but you've gone 28 and 9 in the last 7 weeks, 13 and 2 in the last 3. That's pretty impressive.
There you go, baby.
All right, well, with that, let's just get right into the pick'ems. So the first game we have is number 7 Baylor against number 6 Oklahoma. That's the Big 12 championship game at AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas. That's Saturday at 11 a.m. on ABC. Tim, who do you have in that one?
I've got to take Oklahoma. I know they came back from a big deficit against Baylor in the previous game, or previous matchup. But I just don't see Baylor getting that big of a lead, and I have to go with Oklahoma and CeeDee Lamb and Jalen Hurts for the win.
All right, Paul, who do you have in that one?
Yeah, I agree. This almost looks like one of those where it's really close in the early matchup, and then you come back and Oklahoma just blows them out in this one. I can easily see that happening. It's not at home for Baylor this time, so that could play a factor. I just think Jalen Hurts gets it done in the clutch situations.
All right, Jared, who do you have in this matchup?
I'm going to have to take Oklahoma as well. I just think Jalen Hurts is going to be too much for the Baylor defense. I think it's going to be at least a 2-touchdown game. I think Jalen Hurts is going to destroy this Baylor defense.
All right, Will, who do you have in this matchup?
I'll give a quick shout out to Charlie Brewer and just the whole Baylor Bears program. They've really turned stuff around. Brewer especially looked really good, but I really don't think they're going to come close to beating Oklahoma.
I have to agree. I'm going to go with Oklahoma, and you know what that
Put
means.
your money on Baylor.
That's a clean sweep. Clean sweep alert. Everyone picked Oklahoma. That's never good. Except when it is.
Nope, don't like that.
No one likes that.
Haven't we kind of debunked the clean sweep curse at this point?
I mean, it's not too much of a curse, but for all 5 of us very confidently and putting it on the internet, picking a team to win a football game, it's not as high a percentage as it should be.
Let me give you the stat for that one: 17-6, which is 74%. So
I
Not
feel like that
great.
should be higher. It definitely should. Okay, so with that, let's move on to the next college football game in our pick'em. Number 4, Georgia versus number 2, LSU in the SEC championship game at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia, Saturday at 3 o'clock on CBS. Tim, who do you have in that one?
I have seen throughout the season LSU's defense has struggled at times, and so has Georgia's offense. I think in this game, LSU's defense just does just enough to hold the Georgia Bulldogs offense off, and I think Joe Burrow takes over and has a pretty good last regular season game of his career.
All right, Paul.
yeah, this is a great matchup, and really, what it comes down to for me is just that loss to South Carolina. I just can't get over it. I know it was a while ago, and they've since made up for it with a few good wins here, but I just think LSU is gonna win this one. It'll be closer. It'll be one of the closer LSU wins, but I still think they win.
All right, Jared, who do you have in this one?
I got to go with LSU as well. I mean, I didn't include Joe Burrow in my first Heisman watch of this
Mistake.
year, and that was a big mistake because he's just gone off this entire year. And I think again he's just going to prove that he should be the Heisman Trophy winner. And I think they take care of Georgia easily.
All right, Will, who do you have in this one?
Joe Burrow is my favorite player in all college football this season, and I will live and die on Burrow Island. Take LSU.
And that's back-to-back clean sweeps as I will take the LSU Tigers in the SEC championship game. That's a little bit dicey. 2 clean sweeps in one episode. I believe that happened a few weeks ago. It's not looking good. It is not looking good. All right, so with that, let's move on to our third and final college football matchup of the week. Number 1, Ohio State. Number 8, Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game, Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis, Indiana, Saturday, 7 p.m. on Fox. Tim, who do you have in that one?
So last week when I picked Wisconsin over Minnesota, I did not see that much of a margin of points between the two of them. I did not see Wisconsin blowing out Minnesota. And I don't see Wisconsin, sadly, beating Ohio State as much as I would like to. I think the name of the game in this one is how well Chase Young does. I think he ends up stopping the run along with the defensive line of Ohio State. And as long as they keep Cone from getting on a roll, as we saw last week, once he got on a roll, he was did a pretty good job. But I think the Buckeyes defense does it, and I have to go with Ohio State.
All right, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, 2 Heisman Trophy candidates on the same team. I mean, this team is just stacked. Possibly the best Ohio State team we've seen in like 20 years. Like, seriously, this is a good team. Once again, we saw them first person here in Memorial Stadium, but Wisconsin had an impressive win last week, but Ohio State had an even more impressive win on the road. I got to stick with the trend and go with the Buckeyes.
All right, Jared, who do you have in this big-time Big Ten matchup?
I have to go with Ohio State. I mean, Ohio State has already beat Wisconsin this year 38-7. They held Wisconsin under 200 yards, outgained it by approximately 250. I think Ohio State runs away with it.
All right, Will, who do you have in this one?
I really hate that we might look at a third straight clean sweep, and I'd love to see Ohio State lose. But I mean, you can add J.K. Dobbins as a third potential Heisman candidate there with Justin Fields and Chase Young. This is a good team. They're not going to lose to Wisconsin.
I have to agree with all of you guys. I'm going with the Ohio State Buckeyes. That's 3 clean sweeps in a row. That is never happened. 3 clean sweeps in 1 week. That is not a good look for us.
Trifecta.
Upsets beware. Upsets beware. All right, well, let's move on to our first NFL matchup of the episode. The 49ers of San Francisco at the New Orleans Saints Sunday at noon on Fox. Tim, who do you have in that one?
I have this game going the same way most of the 49ers games have gone, and that is the 49ers defense doing a great job against the offense, and the offense of the 49ers just doing enough to win the game. So I'm going to have to go with the San Francisco 49ers purely on the defensive matchup, and I think the defense of the 49ers is just too much for the Saints.
All right, Paul, who do you have in this one?
Yeah, when I see this one, I kind of almost take a look. I mean, you guys talked about, maybe putting Drew Brees, giving him some rest. I almost think this is like that time in the season where the 49ers just kind of pump the brakes. I could be wrong, but, I can see him kind of coasting into like an 11-5 record with, the West possibly in their hands. But I'm going to go with the Saints at home. They're looking good at home this season.
No more clean sweeps. All right, Jared, who do you have in this one? Are you going to pick the 49ers for the second week in a row?
Well, last week I picked them and, they lost. So I'm going to go with the Saints this week. I usually don't
Paul.
I usually don't have much else to add because, I'm not much of a pro sports kind of guy. But I think the Saints will get it done at home. I'm going to go with Saints.
All right, Will, who do you have in this one?
Even as I start this sentence, I'm still not sure. I think there's no team that has consistently screwed each and every one of us here on Pick'ems up more than the 49ers.
We've been picking them a lot over the weeks.
But even when we don't pick them, they win. When we do pick them, they lose. Just a whole... part of it's we rarely pick them at the start, but it's just a whole chaotic deal. I'm tired of picking the 49ers, and but I fear them greatly, so I will pick them.
That is the way to do it. Making Will Byerman do something through fear, something that is rarely done. I'm going to have to stick with him, but more than sticking with them, I have to stick away from Jared DeHaan. So I'm going to pick the 49ers. Again, the number one defense in the NFL. And Jimmy G, he's got some more weapons now with Emmanuel Sanders. That offense is going to start to click. One of the best rushing attacks in the NFL. Just happened to run into the best run defense in the league in the Ravens last week. That buzzsaw of a defense. So I'll have to go with the 49ers as they've looked pretty consistent outside of that win in the past few weeks. So our final Pick'ems game, it's the Kansas City Chiefs at the New England Patriots, Sunday at 3:30 on CBS. Tim, who do you have in this one?
I think we saw a lot about what can happen when a good offense goes up against the New England Patriots defense. And with Deshaun Watson kind of blowing the defense out of the water, I don't see a change in that with Patrick Mahomes. I think Patrick Mahomes comes into this game and he has a good game, and I don't see the offense of the Patriots doing more than the Kansas City Chiefs offense does. So I'm going to have to go with the Chiefs on this one.
All right, Paul.
Yeah, I might be biased on this one as a KC fan, but let's be honest. We've talked about it. The Patriots' schedule has been nothing to brag about. And they just lost to the Texans. I guess the Chiefs did too. But if you look at another common opponent, the Ravens, the Chiefs handed them one of their 2 losses on the season. And we all know what the Ravens did to the Patriots. So I'm going with the Chiefs.
Your common opponents thing falls apart when you don't realize that the Ravens are a completely different team now.
A completely unbiased look by our Marko Jurkovic.
Wearing a Red Sox cap.
Hey, man. All right, Jared, who do you have in this one?
You know what? I'm going to go with the New England Patriots. Let's give Tom Brady the benefit of the doubt. Instead, Tom Brady's going to have a great game.
Oh, God.
I'm going to go with the Patriots.
Jared, how dare you?
Sorry, I just had to go with them.
Will, who do you have in this one?
First, it's weird how all of our college games, no brainers this week. But this is probably the 2 of the toughest pro games we had to pick. But I'll take the Chiefs. I'll go with the Chiefs.
Jared, you hurt me greatly by doing that, but I'm sticking with Belichick. I'm sticking with Brady. I've got some reasoning behind this. The Patriots, the number 14 offense in the NFL, number 2 defense. Chiefs, number 4 offense, number 25 defense. So, however bad you want to say the Chiefs, or however bad you want to say the Patriots defense or offense is, not as bad as the Chiefs defense. The Chiefs have been struggling as of late. So have the Patriots. I think this is a really decisive game. If these teams want buys in the playoffs, they're going to wrap up their divisions quite easily, I think. But if they want buys in the playoffs, this is a deciding game in that. And I just think the Patriots are just going to be a bit more clutch. They haven't lost to the Chiefs in a long time. And
The Chiefs haven't been this good in a long time.
they were pretty good last year, and they beat them twice.
Well, I mean, strength of schedule this year. Take a look at that.
And the Patriots, week by week, that receiving core is going to get stronger and stronger. Last week, they did not have Mohamed Sanu or Philip Dorsett. So, we'll have to see how the Patriots do. They're as low as they've ever been in my power rankings, so we'll have to see. So that is it for episode 12 of the Unqualified Opinions podcast. Just kidding. It's a surprise hot take from Will Byerman.
Here we go, boys. This is a spicy one. James Harden might be the most underrated NBA superstar of the 2010s decade. I mean, obviously
The whole decade.
whole decade, because obviously he's got the individual accolades, he's got the MVP award. But I feel like when we talk about historic players in the league, we still don't really talk about James Harden. Let me pull up some stats real quick. Obviously, MVP award, which is tremendous. He's played for some really good Houston teams. But I mean, again, when you're thinking about the elite players in the league even now, I think it still takes people a while to get to James Harden. It could be because Houston, while always good, is never huge into the spotlight. Golden State's overshadowed them for a bit. The Cavs overshadowed them for a bit. But if you look at it, even his last few games, 50 points, 9 rebounds, 6 assists. Last night, a couple nights ago, 60 points, 8 assists. He's just averaging monster numbers. He's averaging 39.5 points. These are Wilt Chamberlain scoring numbers. And yet, I still don't think he gets as much respect as a lot of his peers, even as he outshines a lot of them.
So, guys, how hot of a take do we think that is? Also, I just want to let the viewers know that the second that Jared DeHaan, Mr. Jared DeHaan, found out that the hot take was an NBA topic, the surprise hot take, Jared DeHaan got out of his seat and walked away from the microphone. Jared?
The only thing I have to say about
Come on, Jared, hold it. You know what? This is what happens.
Professional, guys.
Jared just does it. This is what happens. Jared gets flustered by professional sports.
This is what happens when NBA is thrown in my face. But can we just talk about the James Harden dunk last night? I mean, missed dunk.
Made dunk. He made that.
Well, they called it a missed dunk.
You know what? That's a big controversy. They want to replay the game. Spurs aren't going to let it happen. Let's get back to the hot take. Tim, your thoughts?
I think it's a medium hot take. I mean, I think he's been consistently. I don't know. He's been consistently in the MVP
Is
discussion.
he this season, though?
And, I mean, he is this season, but the one thing that's really held him back is his defense. If you're going to play offense, you might as well. You have to play a little bit of defense, too. And I think he just hasn't lived up to maybe the hype of an MVP on the defensive side. I mean, he's done a fantastic job on the offensive side. But, I mean, if you don't play defense, you're not going to be as thought of as somebody who does.
And I'm not disagreeing at all. His defense always leaves a lot to be desired. However, I think it's mostly because of that. And I get it. You want your MVP to just be the best possible player on all ends of the court. But if he's averaging 39 points per game, and he's been like at that, he's increased every year. He's increased his points per game every year since his MVP year. But it could be the novelty effect or whatever.
Well, but looking at just the season, the Rockets are number 1 in total offense, number 6 in total defense. James Harden is playing a part in that. He has improved year after year as a defensive playmaker.
He's got better on both sides of the ball every year since his MVP year. But again, he was in the conversation with Giannis. But I mean, even now, like, you're seeing him behind. People will have him behind Giannis still. My boy Luka, who I think really has the best shot at it because of
legitimate
his
chance.
Rebounding and passing are better than Harden's, even if his scoring's a little lower. But also Pascal Siakam and LeBron are starting to pass him up on rankings. Like, I'm not saying he's the greatest of all time. His defense definitely hurts him there, but he's probably top 5 offensive player of all time.
Anybody else have thoughts on that hot take from Will Byerman?
I mean, mostly going to you, Marco, because you're our other NBA guy here.
I mean, you know what? I think definitely a top 5 scorer of all time. Might be the best scorer since Michael Jordan, at least when it comes to that type of scoring, as more of a distance shooter. and a ball handling guard.
As
I
Kobe
think,
fans sense a disturbance in the force, prepare to cry online.
I mean, let's just be honest. Kobe is just MJ light.
Thank you. Yeah.
James Harden is a whole nother style. He's his own unique type of scorer.
Kobe Bryant is the greatest of all time. Don't you ever say anything against that.
No, we were talking about, you and me talked about this a bit before the show. And that Kobe, all time great, but not the best of all time. But Kobe always was like MJ. I can't name a guy who Harden is like. Harden's his own mold from now. He's a new standard.
Right, there's no one close to the type of play style James Harden is. Well, before we let this rambling go on into the distance forever, let's just cut this one short. So thank you so much for joining us on the longest episode of Unqualified Opinions ever, episode 12, the longest episode to date. If you made it through it, thank you so much, and we will see you all next time.